Her fingers, gentle against the raw, fevered skin of the white man, trembled slightly. To even touch him here, on sacred Apache soil, was a betrayal. To save him, an act of treason, punishable by the harshest tribal law. He was an enemy, an outsider, bleeding out where he shouldn't be, his life slipping away with every ragged breath. Yet, as Sansi knelt beside the wounded cowboy, his handsome face pale beneath the grime and blood, her healer's instinct warred with generations of ingrained duty. This one forbidden choice, made in the harsh glare of the western sun, would ignite a love strong enough to challenge a legacy of hate, but would it save their worlds, or deliver them both to utter ruin? Their story begins on the edge of a knife, a forbidden touch that promised either salvation or damnation, a whisper of hope in a land thirsty for blood. Sansi, whose Apache name meant star that shines brightly, moved with the quiet grace of a shadow through the lands of her Chiricahua people. The singing river, a ribbon of life snaking through a protective canyon, was the heart of her village. For uncounted seasons, her tribe had thrived here, their existence interwoven with the rustling cottonwoods, the calls of hawks, and the sacred pulse of the earth. Sansi was a true daughter of this ancient lineage, her spirit as free as the eagles soaring above, her wisdom deeper than her years suggested. She was known not for a warrior's ferocity, though she could ride and track with the best of them, but for her profound gift of healing. Sacred Heart, some called her in hushed, respectful tones, a name earned by mending shattered bones, soothing burning fevers, and calming the most troubled spirits with hands that seemed to channel the river's own restorative power. Her days were a tapestry of traditional tasks, gathering potent herbs from the sun-drenched foothills, tending the communal plots of corn and beans, her needle flashing as she stitched intricate patterns onto buckskin. Yet, an unsettling current had begun to disturb the ancient rhythms of their lives. The whispers of Nantan Lupan, the white eyes, pushing ever westward, had grown from distant murmurs to anxious warnings. Warriors, their faces etched with concern, returned from patrols reporting new trespasses. Freshly blazed trails scarring the earth, ancient trees felled by careless axes, the far-off, alien clang of prospectors' steel against stone. A palpable tension, tight as a bowstring, hummed through the village. Sansi saw it in the grim set of her father's jaw, Chief Nako, a leader whose sagacity was as vast as the desert sky. She felt it in the restless energy of the younger warriors, particularly Chogan, whose dark eyes held a constant, burning suspicion of any outsider, any deviation from the old ways. Chogan, who also desired Sansi's hand, saw the world in stark terms of loyalty and threat. The man Sansi, now cradled, his head resting against her buckskin-clad chest, was undoubtedly such a threat by Chogan's measure. Ethan, though she did not yet know his name, was clearly a cowboy. His leather chaps were ripped and stained, his shirt a dark canvas of dried and fresh blood. A vicious gash above his temple wept sluggishly, and his breathing was a shallow, painful rasp. Even through the mask of dirt and agony, his features were rugged, almost noble, though etched with a profound weariness that hinted at a soul battered by more than just this recent violence. He had been a scout for the army, a life he'd shed like a snakeskin when its brutal demands and casual cruelties became an unbearable weight. He'd been seeking a quiet corner of the world, a patch of earth to call his own, far from the ghosts of his past. But the West was a relentless beast, and peace was a fragile dream, easily shattered. Now, he was caught in its brutal jaws, deposited here, on the precipice of oblivion. As Sansi gently brushed matted brown hair from his forehead, his eyelids fluttered. For a heartbeat, his blue eyes, clouded with delirium and pain, met hers. A flicker of primal fear, of a cornered animal. Then they rolled back, and the darkness reclaimed him. Sansi knew the unyielding law of her tribe, an armed enemy discovered on their land, so close to their hidden sanctuary, was to be met with swift, lethal justice. Yet, looking at his vulnerable, broken form, the healer in her, the Sacred Heart, recoiled. This was not a defiant warrior, but a man utterly at the mercy of fate and her compassion. The ambush had been a nightmare of sudden, overwhelming violence. Ethan had been riding point for a small cattle drive, a temporary job to fund his westward drift. He'd felt a prickle of unease all morning as they entered a narrow, rock-strewn pass. The air was too still, the landscape unnervingly silent. His seasoned instincts, honed by years of navigating hostile territory, screamed danger. He tried to warn the trail boss, a stubborn, overconfident man named Henderson, but Henderson had scoffed. "Getting spooked by shadows, Ethan? Ain't nothing out here but dust devils and coyotes?" Then, all hell broke loose. Gunfire erupted from the craggy bluffs overlooking the pass. Men screamed. Horses shrieked in terror and pain. Ethan saw Henderson grab his chest, a look of utter disbelief on his face as he pitched from his saddle. This wasn't a random raid. It was a calculated, merciless slaughter. Through the smoke and chaos, Ethan caught a chilling glimpse of the attacker's leader, a man with eyes as cold and pale as a winter sky, his mouth a cruel slash in a remorseless face. A sickening lurch of recognition hit Ethan. Barton Finch. A prospector by trade, a predator by nature. Finch carved his way through the frontier, leaving a trail of ruined lives, seizing any land rumored to hold riches, eliminating any obstacle with cold-blooded efficiency. Ethan had crossed Finch's path once before. Down near the Gila, had seen him drive a terrified family from their homestead with threats and casual brutality. Ethan's quiet word of protest then had earned him a look from Finch that promised future retribution. Now, it seemed, Finch either had a long memory or Ethan had once again stumbled into the path of his avarice. Perhaps he'd seen too much. A bullet seared across Ethan's temple, the impact sending him sprawling from his horse, his vision exploding into painful, blinding stars. Another slug tore through his side as he slammed into the unforgiving earth, the agony stealing his breath. He'd somehow managed to drag himself into a dense thicket of thorny mesquite, the horrifying sounds of the massacre dimming as a blessed darkness enveloped him. How long he'd lain there, drifting on a red tide of pain and fever, he couldn't fathom. When he'd finally surfaced, the sun was a merciless eye in the sky, the silence broken only by the insistent buzzing of blowflies. He was alone, consumed by a raging thirst and a body that felt like one massive throbbing wound. Driven by a primal need for water, he'd crawled, inch by agonizing inch, towards the faint, distant murmur of a stream, eventually collapsing near the blood-slicked stones where Sansi had found him. Sansi assessed the unconscious man. His breathing, though still dangerously shallow, had a fraction more strength than moments before. But the wound in his side was a festering horror, inflamed and angry. The gash on his head, though no longer bleeding freely, was almost certainly the source of the fever that made his skin burn. She couldn't leave him. Vultures or wolves would find him by nightfall, or worse, a patrol from her own tribe. Chogan, especially, frequented this stretch of river. If he discovered this white man, Sansi suppressed a shudder. Chogan adhered to the old laws with a fierce, unbending rigidity. He would see only an enemy, a defiler of their land. Her mind raced, a whirlwind of desperate calculation. Taking him to the village was an act of madness. It would endanger not only herself, but her entire family, her entire tribe. Her father, Chief Nako, was a man of profound reason, but even his wisdom might be overruled by the council if this stranger were perceived as an imminent threat. She had to conceal him, tend to his wounds in the shadows. She remembered an old, abandoned hunter's shelter, a shallow, dry cave tucked away behind a dense curtain of willows further upstream, a place forgotten by most. It would have to suffice. Summoning every ounce of her strength, Sanse began the arduous task of lifting the wounded stranger. He was a dead weight, his limp body a testament to his near-fatal injuries. Her muscles screamed in protest, but the resolve in her heart was an unquenchable fire. She would not let this man perish, not if she could prevent it. It was a choice fraught with peril, a direct defiance of her people's sacred traditions, a dangerous secret that now bound her to him. The sun beat down relentlessly, and the only sounds were her own strained breaths and the faint, unconscious moans of the man whose life now lay entirely, precariously, in her trembling hands. The path ahead was shrouded in uncertainty for them both. The cave, barely an overhang in the sandstone cliff, offered meager shelter, but it was dry and, crucially, hidden from casual view by a thick veil of whispering willows and tenacious vines. With a soft grunt of effort, Sansi laid Ethan on a hastily gathered bed of dry grasses. His skin radiated heat, his lips were cracked and parched. The wound in his side looked even more menacing in the dim light, swollen and oozing a foul discharge. With a focused intensity, she used the keen edge of her flint knife to cut away the stiff, blood-caked fabric of his shirt. Her touch, honed by years of healing, was surprisingly tender yet ruthlessly efficient. She cleansed the wound with cool, clear water from the nearby creek, her heart constricting at the sight of the torn, violated flesh. He groaned, a deep, guttural sound of pure agony, his body arching involuntarily. But he remained lost in the darkness of unconsciousness. Sansi knew, with a chilling certainty, that she needed potent herbs, and quickly, to combat the raging infection and the consuming fever. For the following days, Sansi existed in two separate worlds. In the village, she was the dutiful daughter, the skilled healer, her face an impassive mask of calm as she performed her daily chores. But her mind was a turmoil of anxiety, constantly replaying the image of the hidden man. She forced herself to eat, to engage in conversation, to smile. All the while her senses were stretched, taut, alert for any sign that her secret was discovered. Each evening, as twilight painted the canyon walls in shades of purple and gray, she would slip away, a small deerskin pouch containing food and freshly gathered herbs concealed within her berry basket. She'd located a patch of potent feverfew and gathered willow bark to combat his relentless temperature, and she carefully crushed yarrow leaves into a poultice to pack into the suppurating wound. These were the ancient remedies of her grandmother, a legendary healer whose wisdom now flowed through Sansi's own hands. Ethan, meanwhile, tossed in a turbulent sea of fever dreams and searing pain. Shattered images assailed him. Finch's cold, predatory eyes, the terrifying shriek of a dying horse, the endless sun-baked trail, and then a recurring vision of gentle hands, a cool touch on his burning brow. He was dimly aware of a presence, a soft, soothing murmur in a language he didn't understand. Sometimes, through the shimmering haze of delirium, a face would emerge, a woman with dark, compassionate eyes, filled with a strange blend of caution and profound concern. He didn't know who she was, or where this strange, shadowy refuge was located, only that her touch brought fleeting moments of blessed relief from his torment. He clung to those moments, to her presence, as a drowning man clings to driftwood. Their communication was a silent, elemental language, born of necessity and a raw, undeniable human connection. Sansi would gently cradle his head, helping him sip precious water from a cupped cottonwood leaf. She would meticulously change the poultice on his wound, her expression unreadable, but her movements precise and careful. He, in his brief, scattered moments of lucidity, would simply watch her, a silent, desperate question in his pain-filled eyes. Who are you? Why are you risking so much for a stranger, an enemy? Her only answer was in her continued care, her unwavering, if wary, presence. One cool evening, as she was carefully applying a fresh dressing of crushed herbs to his side, Ethan's eyes opened, and for the first time since she'd found him, they held a spark of genuine clarity. He looked at her, truly seeing her, taking in the intricate beadwork on her buckskin dress, the dark, glossy braids that framed her face, the steady, unwavering intensity of her gaze. His voice, when he tried to speak, was a hoarse, broken rasp. Water, he managed, the single word a monumental effort. Sansi nodded, her heart leaping with a strange mixture of relief and trepidation, and quickly fetched some from a small clay pot. As he drank, his eyes never left hers. "Who?" he whispered, the effort visibly draining him. Sansi hesitated. She knew no English, and he, clearly, no Apache. She touched her chest lightly. "Sansi," she said, her voice soft, barely audible above the chirping of crickets outside the cave. Then she gestured towards him with a questioning look. He understood. "Ethan," he rasped out, the name a fragile offering, a name, a connection, a beginning. The immense risk Sansi had undertaken weighed on her like a physical burden. Chogan, the ever-watchful warrior, whose possessive gaze often lingered on her, had begun to notice her increasingly frequent evening departures. His eyes, as sharp and observant as a hawk's, missed very little. Chogan was fiercely, almost fanatically, protective of his people and their ancient traditions, and his profound suspicion of anything or anyone outside their established ways was well known. He was also a persistent suitor for Sansi's hand, a match her father had not discouraged, though Sansi herself felt only a suffocating unease in his presence. One late afternoon, as she was returning from her clandestine visit to Ethan, having just seen a flicker of actual recognition in his eyes, Chogan intercepted her near the whispering willows by the riverbank. His powerful arms were crossed over his broad chest, his expression a thundercloud of suspicion. "You wander far from the village these days, Sansei," he said, his voice a low, challenging rumble. "The high desert holds many dangers, even for one as skilled in woodcraft as you." Sansei met his piercing gaze with an outward calm she did not feel, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "I gather healing herbs, Chogan. The moon is right for certain roots," he grunted, clearly unconvinced. "Be wary, Sansi. The spirits of our ancestors do not look kindly upon secrets kept from the heart of the tribe." His words were a thinly veiled threat, and Sansi knew with a sickening certainty that her precarious deception could not last much longer. Ethan, though still profoundly weak, was undeniably mending. His fever had finally broken, the angry inflammation around his wounds slowly receding. He was more alert now, his gaze following her movements with an intensity that was a mixture of profound gratitude and bewildered questioning. He would try to form simple words, make gestures. She would respond in kind. A fragile, tentative bridge of understanding was being painstakingly constructed between their two disparate worlds, word by word, gesture by gesture, in the quiet, fire-lit sanctuary of the hidden cave. But the looming shadow of Chogan's discovery and the inevitable wrath that would follow stretched ever longer, ever darker. Ethan's strength returned in small, precious increments, each one a victory hard won against the ravages of his injuries. The consuming fever finally relinquished its grip, leaving him weak and drenched in sweat, but lucid. The agonizing, stabbing pain in his side gradually dulled to a persistent, throbbing ache, a constant, unwelcome reminder of his violent brush with oblivion. He spent his waking hours observing Sansi as she moved with quiet efficiency about the confines of the small cave, her presence a silent, potent reassurance. He saw the deep furrows of worry that creased her brow when she believed he wasn't looking, the almost imperceptible sag of weariness in her shoulders after her long, clandestine journeys to bring him sustenance and healing herbs. A gratitude so profound, it felt like an ache in his chest swelled within him, inextricably mingled with a burgeoning admiration for her unwavering courage and her deep, instinctual compassion. He learned to anticipate the soft rustle of leaves, the almost soundless fall of her moccasins that heralded her arrival. He began to try and help in small ways, offering to replenish the water skin from the tiny spring that trickled nearby once he could finally stand, albeit unsteadily, on his own 2 feet. Sansi would permit these small efforts, and sometimes a rare, fleeting smile would touch her lips, illuminating her serious face like a sudden ray of sunshine. Their attempts at communication evolved, becoming more nuanced, more inventive. Ethan, using gestures that were often clumsy but earnest, and drawing crude, stick-figure pictograms in the dust of the cave floor with a charred twig, tried to convey the horror of what had befallen him, the sudden, brutal ambush, the cold-eyed men who had gunned down his companions. He sketched a greedy-looking figure with piercing eyes, Finch, and then drew stark X's over other figures, representing his fallen comrades. Sansi watched, her expression somber, her dark eyes reflecting a deep understanding. Her people had known too much of such violence, such loss, at the hands of the white man. She, in turn, began to share fragments of her own world, naming the brightly colored birds whose songs filtered into the cave, identifying the various plants she used for healing, describing the vital importance of the singing river, the very heart of her people's land. He painstakingly learned the Apache word for water, too, and for thank you, ahehi. She, in turn, learned his name for the sun, sol, and the moon, luna, from the few Spanish words he knew. Each new word was a small, shared triumph, another slender thread woven into the improbable tapestry of their growing bond. The quiet, sheltered intimacy of their hidden world, however, was a fragile, easily shattered illusion. Chogan's relentless vigilance had not diminished. If anything, it had intensified. He had observed Sansi slipping away towards the creek far too often, her explanations about gathering rare herbs beginning to sound increasingly hollow, even to less suspicious ears. He noted the extra portions of food she sometimes carried, the subtle but undeniable shifts in her daily routine. His mind, already predisposed to distrust and quick to anger, began to assemble the scattered pieces into a deeply disturbing puzzle. He started to shadow her, his movements as silent and stealthy as a hunting panther. One late afternoon, the air thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, Sansi was carefully helping Ethan take a few tentative steps just outside the cave's entrance, allowing him to breathe the fresher air and feel the weak warmth of the declining sun on his face. Suddenly, Chogan materialized from the dense screen of willows, his face a mask of cold, unadulterated fury, his hand instinctively dropping to the bone-handled knife sheathed at his belt. Sansi froze, her body instantly, protectively, shielding Ethan. "Chogan," she said, her voice low but astonishingly firm, betraying none of the icy terror that seized her heart. Ethan, though still visibly unsteady, straightened his shoulders, his own hand reflexively moving to his hip, to where his gun belt would normally have rested. He might not understand the words, but he understood the raw, palpable menace in the warrior's rigid posture, the undisguised hostility blazing in his dark eyes. Chogan's furious gaze flickered from Ethan's pale, drawn face to Sansi's defiant, unyielding stance. "So," Chogan hissed, his voice dripping with venomous contempt, "this is your shameful secret, Sansi. A white-skinned dog, hidden like a rat on our sacred land. You betray your own blood, your own people." He was grievously wounded, Chogan, at the very door of death. Sansi countered, her chin held high, her gaze unwavering. "My heart would not allow me to leave him to the coyotes and the buzzards." "He is an enemy," Chogan spat, his face contorted with rage. "The law of our fathers is clear. He should have been left to perish, or his life taken swiftly." He took a menacing step forward. Ethan tensed, every instinct screaming at him to defend Sansi, even in his weakened state, but she placed a quick, restraining hand on his arm. "He is a man, Chogan, and he has offered no harm, no threat to any member of our tribe. His kind, his entire race, has harmed us all." Chogan's voice rose to a furious shout. "They steal our ancestral lands. They slaughter our game. They bring sickness and endless sorrow. He is no different from the rest of them." He lunged, not at Ethan, but to seize Sansi's arm in a bruising grip. "You will come with me. The Council of Elders will hear of this unforgivable treachery. And he," Chogan gestured contemptuously towards Ethan, "he will finally face true Apache justice." Sansi knew with chilling certainty what Apache justice would entail for an unauthorized white man discovered hidden on their land, especially one concealed by a member of the tribe. It would mean a swift, brutal, and inevitable death. Desperation lent her an unexpected strength. "No, Chogan, you will not. If you insist on bringing this before the council, then I will speak my truth. but you will not lay a hand on him in violence." Her eyes blazed with a righteous fire that Chogun had never witnessed in her before. He hesitated, momentarily taken aback by her fierce, unyielding defiance. He knew Sansei was deeply respected within the tribe, and her father, Chief Nako, placed great value on her wisdom and compassion. A public accusation, if mishandled, could easily rebound upon him. He released her arm abruptly, his expression still a mask of grim disapproval. "Very well, Sansei. We will see what Chief Nako and the honored elders have to say. But do not delude yourself into thinking this changes the core of the matter. He is a blight upon this land, a danger to us all." With a final, scathing glare at Ethan, Chogun turned on his heel and strode away, his back rigid with suppressed fury. The silence he left in his wake was heavy, suffocating, charged with unspoken fears. Sansi turned to Ethan, her face pale but resolute. "We must go," she said, her voice urgent, though she knew he wouldn't understand the Apache words. She gestured emphatically towards the direction of the village, then made a distinct motion of hands being bound. Ethan's eyes narrowed. He understood the essence of her warning. He was to be taken, judged. He owed this courageous woman his life, 10 times over, and he would not allow her to suffer further because of him. He nodded slowly, his gaze steady. "I understand." The journey to the Chiricahua village was fraught with a palpable tension. Sansei walked ahead, her heart a leaden weight in her chest, each step an effort. Ethan followed, leaning heavily on a sturdy cottonwood branch he'd fashioned into a makeshift crutch. He was still weak, his body aching, but his resolve was a core of steel within him. He would face whatever awaited him with whatever dignity he could muster. As they approached the outer perimeter of the encampment, nestled amongst ancient cottonwoods and shielded by imposing rocky bluffs, figures began to emerge from the brush and hide lodges, their faces a mixture of startled curiosity and deep-seated suspicion. Chogun was already there, speaking with animated indignation to a grim-faced group of warriors, his accusatory gestures pointing back towards Sansi and the approaching Ethan. A ripple of whispers, like dry leaves skittering before a storm, spread through the gathering crowd. Sansi, her head held high, led Ethan directly to the largest, most central lodge, the dwelling of her father, Chief Nako. Nako was a man of imposing, quiet authority, his weathered face, a living map of wisdom earned through hardship, his dark eyes holding both the fierce protectiveness of a leader and the profound weariness of one who carried the immense burden of his people's fate. He listened in stoic, unbroken silence as Chogun, his voice thick with righteous fury, recounted his discovery, vehemently accusing Sansei of blatant treachery and Ethan of being a spy, or worse, a harbinger of further violence. Sansi stood tall and composed, waiting her turn to speak. When Chogun finally finished, his chest puffed with an air of self-importance. Nako's penetrating gaze turned slowly to his daughter. "Sansei," his voice was deep, resonant, like the rumble of distant thunder. "What have you to say in your defense?" Sansi spoke, her voice clear and surprisingly steady, though her hands, clasped before her, trembled almost imperceptibly. She recounted finding Ethan near death's door, of her difficult decision to offer aid, not as an Apache to a sworn enemy, but as one human being to another in desperate, dire need. She spoke of his terrible wounds, his consuming fever, her painstaking efforts to draw him back from the brink. She did not shy away from the immense risk she had consciously undertaken. "He was helpless, my father. My heart, the spirit within me, would not allow me to leave him to die such a solitary, agonizing death." Nako listened, his expression unreadable, his gaze never leaving his daughter's face. Then his focus shifted, settling upon Ethan. "And you, white man," he said, his English surprisingly fluent, a skill acquired through years of bitter, often fruitless negotiations with the encroaching world. "Why are you on our sacred land? Who are you, and what purpose brings you here?" Ethan, leaning heavily on his crutch, met the chief's direct, unwavering gaze. He spoke slowly, deliberately, choosing his words with utmost care. He told them his name, that he was a former Army scout, now simply a traveler seeking a new life. He described the brutal ambush, the merciless men who had attacked his party. As he spoke of the leader, the man with the chillingly cold eyes, he saw a distinct flicker of recognition, of dawning comprehension in Nako's otherwise impassive eyes. This man, Ethan continued, his voice gaining strength, his name is Barton Finch. He is driven by an insatiable greed. He seeks gold, I know, but I believe he sought something more this time. He spoke. He spoke of controlling water, of a vital river, a hidden spring. At the pointed mention of controlling water, a palpable murmur of unease ran through the assembled elders. Water was the very essence of life in this harsh, arid land. Their own singing river was precious beyond measure, but there were other, more hidden sources, places sacred to the tribe for generations. Finch's name, too, clearly struck a dissonant chord of foreboding. Vague, disturbing reports had already reached the village of a ruthless white prospector, pushing aggressively into the foothills, his heavily armed men showing no respect for Apache territory or Apache lives. Small hunting parties had reported brief, tense encounters with Finch's men, who were blazing new trails and felling ancient trees with an alarming, destructive speed, always moving closer, always encroaching. The shadow of Barton Finch was no longer a distant menace. It was now lapping at the very borders of their sanctuary. It was then that an old woman, one of the tribe's most revered and ancient wise women, spoke. Her name was Istus, and her voice, though frail with age, carried an undeniable weight of authority that silenced the murmurs. "The Whispering Falls," she said, her gaze distant, her eyes clouded as if seeing visions hidden from others. "The old prophecies speak of a time when the sacred falls would be gravely threatened by men of stone hearts, consumed by greed, and it is foretold that its hereditary guardian would be sorely tested, and that an outsider, wounded and lost, would play an unexpected, vital part in its salvation." All eyes in the lodge turned slowly, inevitably, towards Sansi. The Whispering Falls was a place of immense spiritual power, a series of breathtaking, cascading waterfalls that fed a hidden, fertile valley deep within the most protected part of their territory. Its waters were said to possess unique healing properties, and the spirits of their most revered ancestors were believed to dwell there. And Sansi, through her maternal lineage, was indeed the hereditary guardian of this sacred site, a solemn responsibility she had carried with quiet reverence since her youth. Her people called her Sacred Heart, not only for her compassionate healing, but also for this profound, sacred duty tied to the very spiritual heart of their land. Sanse's breath caught in her throat, a sharp intake of stunned realization. She had known of the ancient prophecy, of course, as all in her tribe did, but she had never, not for a single moment, connected its profound words to her impulsive actions, to this wounded stranger. Could it possibly be? Had some unseen, guiding spiritual force directed her hand when she made the fateful decision to save Ethan? Chief Nako looked from the wizened face of Istus to his daughter, whose expression was a mixture of awe and apprehension, then back to the watchful Ethan. The disparate pieces of the puzzle were falling rapidly into place, forming a deeply disturbing, yet strangely coherent, picture. Finch was not just a random, greedy gold seeker. He was a direct, calculated threat to one of their most sacred, life-giving sites. Perhaps he was unaware of its full spiritual significance, or perhaps he had brutally extracted some information about its hidden importance. And Ethan, the wounded stranger, was no longer just an enemy. He was a potential, if unwitting, key. He had seen Finch, knew his brutal methods, his relentless drive. "This Barton Finch," Nako said, his voice now heavy with gravity. "His men have been sighted moving steadily towards the broken mesa, which lies perilously close to the hidden trail leading to the Whispering Falls. They scar the earth with their digging. They foul the pure streams with their waste. They are like a plague of locusts upon the land." He fixed Ethan with an intense stare. "You say this?" Finch spoke of controlling water. "The Whispering Falls is the very life source of that hidden valley. the spiritual heart of our people. If he finds it, if he controls it, the unspoken consequence, the utter devastation it would mean, hung heavy and suffocating in the firelit air of the lodge. Chogan scoffed, his skepticism still deeply entrenched. A prophecy? We are to stake our people's survival on the faded ramblings of an old woman and the unverified word of this white man? He remained unconvinced, his distrust of Ethan absolute and unyielding. He is still an enemy. He knows our land now, the location of our village. He is a danger. Perhaps, Nako countered, his eyes sharp as flint. He is an enemy who now shares a powerful, common foe with us. A foe who threatens to destroy us all, Apache and perhaps even his own kind who stand in Finch's way. He turned back to Ethan. If we were to allow you to live, white man, if we were to place a fragile trust in your words, would you help us understand this man Finch, his ruthless plans, his exploitable weaknesses? Ethan straightened his weary frame, the exhaustion in his eyes momentarily eclipsed by a flicker of fierce determination. He thought of Finch's cold-blooded cruelty, the good men he had seen mercilessly slaughtered. He thought of Sansi's unwavering kindness, the precious gift of life she had selflessly given back to him. He owed her, and by extension, her people, a debt he could never fully repay. Finch is utterly ruthless, Ethan said, his voice stronger now, resonating with conviction. He takes what he wants, and he destroys whatever stands in his path. He's well armed, and his men are fiercely loyal, bought with promises of riches and bound by fear of his brutality. But he's also dangerously arrogant. He grossly underestimates anyone he considers beneath him, anyone not like him. Ethan paused, then met Nako's searching gaze directly. I saw maps in his tent before the ambush, crude sketches, but he was meticulously marking water sources. He's searching for something specific, something vital. If the Whispering Falls is as important as you say, he will not stop until he finds it, or until he himself is stopped permanently. He glanced at Sansi, a silent, solemn promise passing between them in that charged moment. I will tell you everything I know. I will help you in any way I can, if you'll have me. A tense, profound silence filled the lodge. The elders exchanged long, meaningful glances. Chief Nako looked at his daughter, Sansi, whose gaze was fixed intently on Ethan, her expressive eyes reflecting a tumultuous mixture of fear and burgeoning hope. The decision before them was monumental, potentially tribe-altering. To trust an outsider, an enemy by birth and history, went against generations of hard-learned caution and bitter experience. Yet, the threat posed by Barton Finch was undeniably real, terrifyingly immediate, and potentially catastrophic. The ancient prophecy, too, resonated deeply with the people who lived by the signs, the wisdom, and the guidance of their ancestors. Finally, Nako spoke, his voice carrying the full weight of his authority and the burden of his responsibility. The council will deliberate on this grave matter. Ethan will remain here, under guard, but treated with the respect due to a guest, for now. Sansi, my daughter, you have acted according to the dictates of your compassionate heart. Now, we must all pray that your heart is spoken with the true wisdom of the Great Spirit. The initial disruption had escalated into a full-blown crisis, and now, a major, precarious turning point was upon them. An unlikely, fragile alliance, born of shared desperation and a common, formidable enemy, began to glimmer like a solitary, distant star in the rapidly encroaching darkness. The fate of the sacred Whispering Falls, and perhaps the very survival of the Chiricahua tribe, now hinged precariously on the courage of a young Apache woman and the uncertain word of a wounded, enigmatic stranger. The council's deliberation felt like an eternity to Sansi, each passing moment stretching her nerves tauter. Chogan argued with impassioned vehemence against placing any trust in Ethan, his words painting the cowboy as a cunning deceiver, a potential spy who, if given the chance, would undoubtedly lead Finch's murderous band directly to their hidden stronghold. Other elders, however, swayed by Istis's solemn recounting of the prophecy and by Ethan's seemingly earnest demeanor and valuable information, urged caution but also careful consideration of his offer. Chief Nako listened with unwavering patience to every voice, his face an impassive mask, meticulously weighing the dire risks against the potential, life-saving rewards. Ethan, meanwhile, was confined to a guarded lodge, treated with a stern but not unkind formality. Sansi was permitted to bring him food and water, and she used these brief, precious moments to convey her burgeoning hope, her lingering fear, through fleeting glances and hushed whispers. Ethan, in turn, tried to reassure her with a quiet confidence he didn't entirely feel, for his own future remained profoundly uncertain. During one such visit, as Sansi was carefully redressing the healing wound on his side, Ethan spoke in a low, urgent voice. "Finch, he carries a ledger, a small, black, oilskin-covered book. He records everything in it, his crooked dealings, his planned routes, crude maps, names of contacts, even his dark intentions. If your people could somehow obtain that book, it would lay bare his entire operation." He quickly described where Finch usually kept it, either in the left saddlebag that rarely left his horse's side, or tucked under his cot in his tent when encamped. This single piece of specific, actionable intelligence, seemingly small, was a vital seed from which a daring plan might sprout. Finally, after what seemed like an age, Chief Nako summoned Ethan and Sanse back to the main council lodge. The air within was thick with unspoken anticipation. Nako's gaze was intensely stern as he addressed Ethan directly. "We have reached a decision. You will be given a chance to prove the truth of your words and the sincerity of your offer. Our most trusted scouts have confirmed your information. Finch's men are indeed camped near the broken mesa, and their destructive activity is increasing daily. They are now dangerously, unacceptably close to the hidden trail that leads to the sacred Whispering Falls." He paused, allowing the gravity of his words to sink in. "We will dispatch a small, elite party to observe Finch's movements, to ascertain more precisely his strength and his immediate intentions. You, Ethan, will guide them. You know this man, his habits, his likely tactics." Chogan surged to his feet in protest. "Chief, to send him! It is madness! He will betray us at the first opportunity." Nako silenced him with a single, authoritative wave of his hand. "Chogan, your deep-seated distrust is noted, and perhaps not entirely unwarranted. Therefore, you will be part of this scouting party. You will watch him like a hawk. If he makes one false move, one gesture of betrayal, your arrow will find its mark without hesitation." His eyes then softened almost imperceptibly as he looked at his daughter. "And you, Sansi, my brave child, your intimate knowledge of the sacred terrain surrounding the falls is unmatched. You will also accompany this party. You will ensure that the hidden path to the falls remains inviolate, and you will serve as my eyes and ears, reporting all you see and hear." It was an incredibly risky strategy, placing Ethan in a position of precarious trust while simultaneously keeping him under a direct, lethal threat. But it was also a crucible, a test of his true intentions. The plan was thus set. A small group of the tribe's most skilled and stealthy warriors, led by the still skeptical Chogan and guided by Ethan and Sansi, would depart at first light. Their perilous mission, to gather crucial intelligence on Finch's operation, and if a clear opportunity arose, to subtly disrupt his plans without triggering a full-scale conflict for which they were not yet adequately prepared. Ethan felt a surge of adrenaline, mixed with a grim determination. This was his chance to repay Sanse's life-saving compassion, to earn the genuine trust of her people, and to strike a decisive blow against the man who had so callously left him and his comrades for dead. The journey towards the broken mesa was undertaken with swiftness and an almost preternatural silence. Ethan, despite the lingering ache from his still healing wound, moved with a quiet, woods-wise competence that grudgingly impressed some of the keen-eyed warriors. He pointed out subtle signs of Finch's passage that even their expertly trained eyes had nearly missed, A freshly broken twig bent in an unnatural direction, a barely perceptible disturbance in the pattern of stones on the trail. His knowledge of tracking, hard learned during his years as an army scout, was proving unexpectedly invaluable. Sansi walked mostly beside him, her presence a silent wellspring of quiet strength and reassurance. Chogan, however, remained a brooding shadow of suspicion, his dark eyes constantly fixed on Ethan, his hand never straying far from the feathered notch of an arrow in his quiver. They reached a rocky overlook, offering a concealed view of Finch's camp just as dusk began to bleed across the western sky. The camp was larger, more organized, and more heavily armed than Ethan had initially anticipated. At least 20 rough-looking men, heavily armed with rifles and pistols, moved about the flickering campfires. Tents were haphazardly pitched, and the raucous sounds of crude laughter, drunken singing, and angry disputes drifted up to them on the evening breeze. Finch's tent, noticeably larger and set slightly apart from the others, was easily identifiable. Ethan pointed it out with a grim certainty. That's his den. And the ledger? If it's not on his person, it will be in his saddlebags right outside or under his cot. A daring, almost reckless plan began to take shape in the fading light. While a few of the warriors created a carefully orchestrated diversion on the far side of the sprawling camp, designed to draw out a significant number of Finch's undisciplined men, Ethan, with Sansi, to guide him through the treacherous, unfamiliar darkness and ensure an utterly silent approach, would attempt the incredibly risky feat of retrieving the ledger. If they were caught, discovery would mean certain death for all of them. Chogan argued fiercely against it, favoring a more direct, albeit smaller, surprise attack on the sentries. But Sansi, her voice firm with conviction, spoke up. "Our father, the chief, charged us with learning Finch's precise plans. The book Ethan speaks of will reveal far more than any brief skirmish." Nako's implicit trust in her judgment, combined with Ethan's specific, crucial knowledge of Finch's habits, ultimately swayed the decision. Under the concealing cloak of a moonless, star-dusted night, the audacious plan was set into motion. Two of the most agile warriors, fleet-footed and masters of animal mimicry, began to make noises like a cornered, snarling mountain lion on the far eastern perimeter of the camp. Predictably, shouts of alarm arose as several of Finch's men, grabbing their rifles, clumsily headed out into the darkness to investigate the perceived threat. This was the momentary distraction they needed. Ethan and Sansi, moving like wraiths in the deep shadows, slipped down from the overlook and approached Finch's tent from the less guarded rear. Sansi's innate knowledge of every rock, every bush, every patch of soft earth allowed them to move with an almost supernatural quietness that amazed even Ethan. His heart hammered against his ribs, the sound deafening in his own ears. He could hear Finch's gruff, angry voice from inside the tent, loudly berating someone for some perceived incompetence. The worn leather saddlebags were slung over a makeshift rail just outside the tent flap, exactly as Ethan had predicted. With Sansi keeping a vigilant watch, her senses preternaturally alert to the slightest sound or movement, Ethan crept forward, his breath held tight in his chest. His fingers, trembling slightly despite his efforts at control, fumbled with the stiff leather strap of the main bag. He found it. A small, oilskin-wrapped, rectangular book. His fingers closed around its reassuring bulk, just as a bulky figure suddenly emerged from the tent. It was Finch himself, his face set in a characteristic scowl. Ethan froze, instantly pressed flat against the canvas wall, enveloped by the deep shadow of the tent. Finch grumbled something under his breath about incompetent fools, kicked idly at a loose stone, and then, to Ethan's immense, heart-stopping relief, turned and ducked back inside the tent. Clutching the precious ledger, Ethan melted back into the welcoming darkness where Sansi waited, her eyes wide and luminous. They retreated as silently and swiftly as they had come, rejoining Chogan and the other warriors at the rendezvous point. Even Chogan, upon seeing the ledger, had to concede a silent, grudging measure of respect for the success of their daring, almost suicidal maneuver, though his expression remained carefully guarded. They made their way back to the Chiricahua village under the cold light of the distant stars. The purloined ledger, a heavy, significant weight in Ethan's hand, a potential key to their very survival. The major turning point had been reached, the vital information secured. Now came the perilous task of deciphering and using what they had found. The knowledge contained within that small black book would either arm them for the inevitable, violent storm ahead, or reveal a hidden threat even greater, even more insidious than they had dared to imagine. Back in the comparative safety and flickering firelight of Chief Nako's lodge, with trusted, armed guards posted discreetly outside, Ethan carefully unwrapped the cracked oilskin from Barton Finch's ledger. The dancing firelight cast long, wavering shadows on the tense, expectant faces gathered closely around. Sansi sat near Ethan, her dark eyes fixed with unwavering intensity on the book, while Nako, the aged Istas, and a few of the most trusted tribal elders leaned in, their expressions a mixture of hope and apprehension. Chogan stood slightly apart, his arms crossed, still watchful, still maintaining a sliver of his ingrained skepticism, yet visibly intrigued. Ethan opened the book. The pages were crammed with Finch's tight, spidery handwriting, a chaotic jumble of figures, unfamiliar names, supply lists, and crudely drawn but disturbingly accurate maps. As Ethan, with Sansi occasionally pointing out recognizable landmarks on the maps, began to patiently decipher the cryptic entries. A truly chilling and comprehensive picture of Barton Finch's ruthless ambitions began to emerge with horrifying clarity. It was far worse, far more diabolical than any of them had imagined. Finch wasn't just after any random water source. His detailed notes and precise maps specifically pinpointed the hidden valley and the sacred waters of the Whispering Falls. He referred to it in his notes as Spirit Water Canyon and, more tellingly, the Hidden Oasis Bonanza. He had clearly tortured or bribed the information about its existence out of some unfortunate soul who knew of its location, or perhaps purchased it from a desperate, unknown trader. The ledger meticulously detailed his elaborate plans not just to control the water, but to completely divert its flow, to construct an extensive flume system to support a massive hydraulic mining operation he envisioned further downstream, tearing apart the very mountains. He was evidently planning to bring in dozens more heavily armed men, along with heavy machinery and explosives. The environmental devastation would be swift and catastrophic, poisoning the sacred waters, destroying the fertile hidden valley, and obliterating a site central to the Chiricahua's spiritual identity. But there was an even more sinister entry. One passage spoke chillingly of a final solution for any native interference, detailing a brutal, preemptive surprise attack on any nearby Apache villages once he had fully secured the falls. He was methodically planning to wipe them out, to eradicate them from the land. A cold, visceral dread permeated the lodge, thick and cloying. Istas murmured an ancient prayer for protection, her aged face etched with profound sorrow and righteous anger. Chief Nako's jaw tightened until the muscles stood out like cords, his eyes blazing with a cold, unyielding fury. Even Chogan's deeply ingrained skepticism seemed to shatter in the face of such blatant, documented evil. Sansi felt an icy chill trace its way down her spine. This man, Barton Finch, was not merely a greedy prospector. He was a harbinger of destruction, a man utterly devoid of mercy, respect for life, or any understanding of land held sacred. Her inherited role as guardian of the Whispering Falls suddenly felt infinitely heavier, more desperately urgent than ever before. Ethan pointed a grim finger to a date heavily circled several times in the ledger. "This date, it is just 3 days from now," he said, his voice low and grave. "He plans to make his decisive move then. He's expecting a large shipment of blasting powder to arrive, to clear a wider path for his wagons and equipment." This was their stark, unyielding timeline. 3 short days to prepare, to defend their most sacred site, their homes, their families, their very existence. Chief Nako rose to his full, imposing height, his presence seeming to fill the entire lodge. "This Finch is a venomous serpent," he declared, his voice ringing with unwavering authority and cold fury. He seeks to strike at our very heart, to poison our sacred waters, to steal the very breath of our ancestral land. We will not allow this abomination to happen." He looked directly at Ethan, his gaze intense. "You have brought us this vital, terrible knowledge. You have shown us the true, monstrous face of our enemy. You are no longer a stranger to us, Ethan. You are a man who has chosen to stand with us against this darkness." It was a profound, heartfelt declaration, and Ethan felt a warmth spread through him, a sense of belonging, of shared purpose, that he hadn't experienced in many long, weary years. Chogan stepped forward then, his usually proud expression surprisingly humbled, his voice rough with an unfamiliar emotion. "Chief," he said, his gaze momentarily dropping to the ground before rising to meet Nako's. I was wrong about this man. His courage in retrieving the ledger, his clear willingness to help our people. I see it now. I misjudged him." He turned to Ethan, a flicker of newfound, genuine respect in his dark eyes. "I will fight alongside him, and I will trust his counsel." This public admission from the once hostile Chogan was a significant, powerful shift. The tribe was uniting, forging a common shield against a common threat. Nako nodded slowly, a grim satisfaction on his face. "Good. We will need every warrior, every strong heart, every keen mind for the battle that is to come." He turned to Sonsei, his expression softening with fatherly pride and concern. "My daughter, you are the hereditary guardian of the Whispering Falls. You know its hidden paths, its ancient secrets, better than any living soul. You and Ethan, working closely with Chogan and our most trusted warriors, will devise the plan to defend our sacred place. We cannot hope to match Finch's superior numbers or firepower in open battle, but we have the land itself as our most powerful ally. We have our unwavering courage, and we have the guiding spirits of our ancestors with us." A new, potent energy surged through the lodge, displacing the earlier despair with a steely, focused determination. Sansi felt it, a powerful surge of resolve stiffening her spine. The ancient prophecy Istis had spoken of. Perhaps this was its true, perilous unfolding. She looked at Ethan, no longer seeing just a wounded stranger, but a trusted partner in this desperate, life-or-death struggle. Their eyes met and held, a silent, profound understanding passing between them. The forbidden love that had blossomed in the shadows, under the constant threat of death and discovery, now found itself at the very heart of a battle for their collective survival. It was a love born of two worlds that rarely met in peace, a bond forged in shared peril and cemented by mutual respect. The coming days would test that bond, and the courage of all who dared to stand against the avarice of Barton Finch. The Whispering Falls, serene and sacred, awaited its fate, and its determined defenders were readying themselves for the fight of their lives. The subsequent 2 days were a maelstrom of frenetic, focused preparation. Under the dappled shade of the ancient rustling cottonwoods, Sansi, Ethan, and Chogan bent their heads together over hastily drawn maps of the Whispering Falls and its rugged surrounding terrain. Sansi's encyclopedic, intimate knowledge of every concealed game trail, every narrow, defensible ravine, every natural fortification was utterly invaluable. Ethan, drawing upon his hard-earned experience as a frontier scout and his intuitive understanding of how brutal, greedy men like Finch thought and fought, offered astute tactical suggestions. Chogan, his initial, deep-seated animosity now completely supplanted by a grim, focused determination, skillfully coordinated the warriors, translating their combined strategies into concrete, actionable plans. They knew, with a chilling certainty, that Finch would most likely attempt his main approach from the north, through the treacherous defiles of the Broken Mesa, aiming for the most direct, albeit hazardous, path to the head of the falls, where he intended to set his devastating blasting charges. Their meticulously crafted plan was to transform that anticipated path into a veritable death trap. They would skillfully use the unforgiving terrain to their advantage, Strategically placed rock slides triggered at precisely the right moments to sow chaos and fear, narrow mountain passes converted into deadly ambush points, cleverly disguised false trails designed to lead Finch's men into inescapable dead ends or dangerous cul-de-sacs. The ultimate goal was not merely to repel Finch's assault, but to shatter his will, to scatter his forces, and to decisively capture or kill Finch himself, thereby ending his reign of terror. Warriors meticulously sharpened arrowheads until they gleamed lethally, tested the draw strength of their bowstrings, and prepared small, potent bundles of dried, pungent herbs that, when ignited, would create clouds of choking, disorienting smoke. The women of the tribe gathered piles of smooth, heavy stones for slingshots, and diligently prepared dried meat, parched corn, and water skins for the impending battle. Even the children participated, their small, nimble hands eagerly gathering tinder or silently running messages between the various preparation groups. A grim, unyielding sense of shared purpose united the entire village. They were fighting not just for their homes and their families, but for their sacred places, their ancestral heritage, their very future as a people. Ethan worked tirelessly, shoulder to shoulder with the Apache warriors. He demonstrated how to set nearly invisible tripwire snares, crafted from rawhide and sinew, that could bring down horses or send men sprawling in the darkness. He helped them reinforce natural rock formations with carefully placed boulders to create more effective, concealed defensive positions. His healing wounds still sent jolts of pain through his side with strenuous movement, but he relentlessly pushed through the discomfort, driven by a fierce, protective desire for Sansei and a profound respect for the people who had unexpectedly shown him such kindness and courage. He found himself moving with a renewed sense of vitality, the bone-deep weariness that had clung to him like a shroud for so long, beginning to finally recede, replaced by a warrior's sharp focus. Sansei was a whirlwind of purposeful activity, yet she remained a calm, resolute center in the brewing storm of preparation. She directed groups of warriors with quiet authority, offered words of comfort and reassurance to anxious mothers, and always, somehow, found a moment to share a quiet, encouraging word or a steadying glance with Ethan. Their unspoken bond deepened with every shared challenge, every quick, inadvertent touch of hands as they labored side by side. The inherently forbidden nature of their profound affection was an unspoken, powerful current flowing beneath the surface of their urgent life and death tasks, a fragile, precious flame they both instinctively knew might not survive the unimaginable inferno that was to come. On the fateful morning of the third day, just as the first pale light of dawn touched the highest canyon peaks, Chief Nako's most trusted scouts returned. Their report was grim. Finch's main party was on the move, even larger and more heavily armed than before, with a long train of pack mules laden with tools, equipment, and ominously, canvas-covered crates that could only contain the blasting powder, just as the ledger had foretold. They were heading directly, inexorably, towards the broken mesa. The time for preparation was over. The bloody confrontation was at hand. Chief Nako gathered his warriors, his weathered face grim but resolute. His voice, though somber, rang with an unshakable defiance that ignited a fire in every listening heart. Today, we fight for the sacred land of our ancestors. We fight for the pure waters that give us life. We fight for our children and our children's children. Show these greedy invaders the unbreakable heart and indomitable spirit of the Chiricahua. A mighty, unified war cry erupted from the assembled warriors, a primal sound that echoed off the canyon walls, a solemn promise of fierce, unyielding resistance. Sansi, dressed in practical, unadorned buckskin, a full quiver of arrows slung across her back, and her essential healing herbs secured in a pouch at her waist, stood beside Ethan. He had been given a strong Apache bow, a quiver of razor-sharp arrows, and a long, bone-handled hunting knife, his own rifle having been lost in Finch's brutal ambush. He looked at her, his keen blue eyes filled with a potent mixture of steely resolve and profound concern for her safety. "Stay close to the rocks, Sansi. Be careful. Use your knowledge, not just your courage." She nodded, her dark, luminous eyes meeting his, a silent acknowledgement of the danger and their shared commitment. "You too, Ethan. May the spirits of this land guide your arrows and protect your life." No more words were necessary. Their hearts spoke a language deeper than speech. The first violent engagement exploded in a narrow, winding canyon that served as a natural gateway towards the Whispering Falls. As Finch's swaggering advance scouts recklessly entered the shadowed canyon, a deadly volley of arrows rained down from the precipitous cliffs above, expertly aimed by Chogan's concealed warriors. Horses screamed in agony and terror. Men yelled in shock, surprise, and sudden pain. Before Finch's main force could effectively react or organize a defense, a carefully prepared rockslide, triggered by warriors hidden high above, thundered down with terrifying force, completely blocking the canyon entrance and effectively splitting Finch's disoriented forces. Chaos erupted. Finch, his face purple with rage, bellowed contradictory orders, desperately trying to rally his suddenly panicked men. But they were caught in a deadly, inescapable crossfire, arrows finding their marks with chilling precision. The air filled with the acrid smell of gunpowder, the shriek of bullets ricocheting off stone, and the cries of the wounded. Ethan and Sansi were strategically positioned further up the trail, near a critical, almost impassable juncture where the path to the falls became a treacherous, narrow ledge. Their vital role was to prevent any of Finch's men from breaking through this natural choke point. As a desperate group of Finch's men, attempting to outflank the main ambush and find an alternative route, charged recklessly up the narrow, rock-strewn path, Ethan's arrows, loosed with swift, deadly accuracy, found their marks. Sansi, using her sling with a skill born of long practice, sent heavy, smooth stones cracking against unprotected heads and limbs, forcing the stunned attackers to recoil in pain and confusion. The brutal, disjointed battle raged for what felt like an eternity. A chaotic series of sharp, vicious encounters fought across the unforgiving, rugged terrain. The Apache warriors, fighting with the fierce desperation of those defending their sacred homeland, moved with a deadly, fluid grace, appearing like phantoms from the rocks and brush, striking hard, and then disappearing before their foes could effectively retaliate. Finch's men, though numerically superior and better armed with repeating firearms, were disoriented by the unfamiliar terrain, frustrated by the elusive enemy, and increasingly gripped by a primal fear. Their naked greed was proving a poor match for the Apache's unshakable courage and profound spiritual resolve. Finch, his face, a mask of apoplectic fury at the unexpectedly fierce resistance, brutally pushed his remaining terrified men forward with savage threats and promises of immense riches. He was consumed by an obsessive, almost maniacal determination to reach the falls, to claim the prize that had driven him to such lengths. He finally, bloodily, broke through the initial ambush points, albeit with devastating losses to his force, and found himself on a wider, more open expanse of ground leading directly towards the hidden valley of the Whispering Falls itself. He could hear the distant, tantalizing roar of the cascading water, a sound that further inflamed his avarice and hardened his cruel resolve. It was here, on this more open ground leading to the sacred valley, that Chief Nako had meticulously planned their final, desperate stand. As Finch and his severely depleted, demoralized force charged forward with more bravado than conviction, they were met by a determined, unbroken line of Apache warriors, with Chief Nako himself, his face a grim emblem of defiance, at their head. Ethan and Sansi, having strategically fallen back from their previous defensive position, quickly joined the main line of defense. The fighting devolved into brutal, hand-to-hand combat, primitive and personal. Ethan fought with a cold, controlled fury, his borrowed knife and bow an extension of his focused will. He saw Chogan, fighting like a cornered wolf, his every blow an act of vengeance for past wrongs and present desecration. He saw Sansi, not shrinking from the horrific violence, but moving with a healer's instinct, even amidst the carnage, courageously dragging a severely wounded young warrior to the relative safety of a rock overhang under a hail of errant bullets, then seamlessly rejoining the desperate fray, her sling whirling. Across the swirling chaos of the melee, Ethan spotted Finch, his florid face contorted with insensate rage, firing his heavy pistol indiscriminately into the press of bodies. Their eyes locked, a silent, elemental challenge arced between them. This was the moment of truth. Ethan surged forward, narrowly dodging a wild, desperate swing from one of Finch's few remaining henchmen, his entire focus narrowing to the monstrous architect of this widespread carnage. Finch saw him coming and leveled his pistol with a snarl of recognition. "You!" Finch spat, his eyes wide with disbelief and fury, clearly recognizing the cowboy he had arrogantly assumed was long dead. "I should have put a bullet through your heart myself back in that pass." He fired, but Ethan, anticipating the shot, dived low, the bullet whizzing harmlessly over his head, close enough for him to feel its heat. Ethan came up fast, tackling Finch hard around the waist with the force of a charging bison. They both crashed to the dusty earth, the heavy pistol flying from Finch's grasp. They rolled in the blood-soaked dust, fists flying, grunts of exertion and pain tearing from their throats. Finch was surprisingly strong, his maniacal greed lending him a desperate, almost inhuman power. But Ethan was fueled by something far more potent, a burning desire for justice for his fallen comrades, and a fierce, unwavering determination to protect Sansa and her courageous people. He landed a solid, bone-jarring blow to Finch's jaw, dazing him momentarily. He saw an opening and pressed his advantage with relentless ferocity. The savage fight was short, brutal, and ultimately decisive. Ethan, his face a grim mask of retribution, finally subdued the struggling Finch, pinning him decisively to the ground. The cold steel of his borrowed Apache knife pressed hard against the prospector's sweat-slicked throat. The remaining handful of Finch's men, witnessing their leader's ignominious defeat and finding themselves completely surrounded by enraged, victorious Apache warriors, threw down their weapons in abject surrender, their will to fight utterly broken. A profound, almost unnatural silence descended over the bloody battlefield, broken only by the mournful cries of the wounded and the distant, peaceful, undisturbed roar of the Whispering Falls, which remained untouched, undefiled, victorious. Chief Nako approached, his stern face etched with exhaustion, but also with a profound, solemn triumph. He looked down at the defeated, trembling Barton Finch, then at Ethan, who still held the murderous prospector captive, his grip like iron. "Justice?" Nako declared, his voice carrying clearly across the now quiet, blood-stained ground, "has been served this day." The surviving Apache warriors let out a unified, cathartic, victorious cry that echoed through the sacred valley. The spiritual heart of their land was safe, preserved by their courage and sacrifice. The immediate aftermath of the fierce battle was somber. Despite the victory, several brave Apache warriors had fallen in defense of their homeland, and many more were wounded, their pain a stark reminder of the conflict's terrible cost. Sansa, her beautiful face smudged with dirt and streaked with tears of sorrow and relief, moved tirelessly among them, her healer's touch bringing comfort, staunching wounds, and whispering words of solace. Ethan, his own minor cuts and bruises completely forgotten, worked steadfastly by her side, his presence a quiet support, helping to carry the wounded and offering what little comfort he could. Barton Finch and his surviving, thoroughly cowed men were securely bound, their ultimate fate to be decided by the full tribal council. There would be, everyone knew, no mercy for Finch, the man whose insatiable greed had sought to destroy so much beauty, so much life. His brutal reign of terror on this part of the frontier was definitively, finally over. In the days that followed the battle, a quiet sense of peace, fragile yet deeply precious, settled over the Chiricahua village like a comforting blanket. The fallen warriors were mourned with solemn, heartfelt ceremony. their brave spirits commended to the realm of the ancestors with honor and gratitude. The victory, though undeniably costly, had powerfully reaffirmed the tribe's enduring strength, their unbreakable spirit, and their profound, sacred connection to the land. Ethan was hailed as a true hero. He had fought with exceptional bravery and skill, his knowledge of Finch's ways and his unwavering courage proving instrumental in their hard-won success. He was no longer Ethan, the wounded stranger, but Ethan, who stands with us, a friend, an honored ally. Chogan, his previous animosity completely transformed into staunch admiration and respect, clasped Ethan's arm in a powerful gesture of warrior brotherhood. Chief Nako, in a public gathering before the entire tribe, formally and warmly thanked him, declaring that Ethan would always have a place of high honor among their people, his name remembered in their stories. Yet, amidst the palpable gratitude and the shared, profound relief, a poignant, inescapable reality remained. Ethan was still a white man, an outsider to their ancient ways, and Sansi, an Apache woman, the sacred guardian of the Whispering Falls, deeply bound to her people and her ancestral duties. Their two worlds, despite this extraordinary moment of shared triumph and forged camaraderie, remained vastly different, separated by a deep, often bloody chasm of culture, history, and the pervasive prejudice of the outside world. The profound love that had unexpectedly, miraculously blossomed between them, a love that had been a silent, sustaining strength throughout the desperate conflict, now faced a deeply uncertain, perhaps impossible future. They could not simply marry and live together within the village without inviting endless complications, potentially even renewed conflict from those who would never understand. Nor could Sansi, with her sacred responsibilities, easily abandon her people and her ancestral duties to follow Ethan into his world, a world that had historically shown her people little but hostility, betrayal, and violence. One tranquil evening, as the descending sun dipped below the rugged canyon walls, painting the vast western sky in breathtaking hues of fiery orange, deep purple, and soft rose, Ethan found Sansi standing alone by the gently flowing singing river, the very place where their improbable story had, in a very real sense, truly begun. She was gazing pensively at the water, its surface reflecting the vibrant colors of the sunset, her beautiful face thoughtful, a subtle touch of sadness shadowing her dark, expressive eyes. He sat quietly beside her on the riverbank, the familiar silence between them comfortable, yet laden with a universe of unspoken emotions, of acknowledged impossibilities. "They are deeply grateful to you, Ethan," Sansi said softly, her voice barely disturbing the evening stillness, her gaze still fixed on the mesmerizing flow of the river. "My people, they will not soon forget what you have done for us." "I only did what any decent person should have done, Sansi," he replied, his voice gentle, almost a whisper. "Finch was a blight, a threat to all good folk, whether Apache or white." He paused, then added, his voice thick with an emotion he couldn't conceal, "And I did it for you, mostly for you." She finally turned to him then, her luminous dark eyes searching his, seeking something. "I know," she acknowledged, a small, exquisitely sad smile touching her lips. "Our paths, Ethan, they were never truly meant to cross for more than a fleeting season, were they?" Ethan's heart ached with a dull, heavy pain. He knew, with a certainty that settled like a stone in his gut, that she spoke the undeniable truth. As much as he longed, with every fiber of his being, to stay, to somehow build a life with this extraordinary, courageous woman who had saved him in more ways than he could ever count, he understood the insurmountable complexities, the heartbreaking impossibility of it in this harsh, unforgiving land, in this divided time. "Perhaps not for long," he conceded, his voice thick with unshed tears. "But the time we've shared, it has changed me forever, Sansi. I will carry the memory of it, of you, in my heart, always." He reached out, his calloused fingers gently, reverently, tracing the delicate line of her jaw. Her skin was warm and soft beneath his touch. She leaned into his hand, her eyes closing for a long moment, as if to savor the fleeting contact, to imprint it upon her soul. "The Whispering Falls are safe now," she whispered, her voice like the rustle of leaves. "My heart, it is full of gratitude for that. And for you, Ethan, who stands with us." She opened her eyes, and he saw in their clear depths the profoundness of her affection, a perfect mirror of his own. "You must go, Ethan. Soon. Before the high snows make the mountain passes impassable. Before it becomes even harder for us both to say farewell." He knew, with a chilling finality, that she was right. To stay longer would be to invite more heartache, more painful complications, perhaps even to place her in danger from those in the unforgiving outside world who would never understand or accept their unique, transcendent bond. He nodded slowly, a tight, painful lump forming in his throat, making speech impossible. "I understand." The following morning, Ethan made his preparations to depart. He was gifted a strong, sure-footed pony, ample provisions for a long journey, and the sincere, heartfelt farewells of the entire tribe. Chief Nako clasped his hand firmly, his eyes conveying a deep, abiding respect. "Go in peace and safety, Ethan. May your path be clear, and your heart find solace. You will always be welcome in our lodges, remembered in our prayers, should you ever choose to return." Chogan, his former adversary, now his brother-in-arms, gave him a powerful warrior's embrace. Sansi walked with him in silence to the very edge of the village, their hands clasped tightly, their fingers interlaced. Words seemed utterly inadequate, hollow. He stopped, turning to face her fully. He cupped her beloved face gently in his hands, his thumbs stroking her smooth cheeks, trying to memorize every detail. "Sansei," he began, but his voice, choked with emotion, failed him. She reached up, her slender fingers covering his, stilling their movement. "No words are needed, Ethan. Our hearts know what is true." She leaned in then and pressed a soft, lingering, unforgettable kiss to his lips, a kiss that tasted of wild sage, of sunshine, of unspoken promises, of enduring love and inevitable, heartbreaking loss. It was a farewell, a sacred seal upon their epic, forbidden love story. Then, with a final, soul-wrenching look that conveyed more than words ever could, she stepped back, her composure fragile but intact. "Go now," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the morning breeze. "And do not look back." Ethan mounted his horse, his movements stiff, mechanical. He looked down at her one last, lingering time, etching her image onto his very soul. Her strength, the fierce loyalty in her eyes, the profound love that radiated from her like a palpable force. He turned his horse and rode away, towards the vast, unknown western horizon, resolutely not looking back, for to do so would be to shatter the fragile, hard-won composure he struggled so desperately to maintain. Sansi stood watching, a solitary, graceful figure against the backdrop of her ancestral lands, until he was merely a distant, fading speck, swallowed by the immense indifference of the western landscape. Then she turned, her shoulders squared with resolve, and walked back towards her village, towards the sacred Whispering Falls, her duty clear, her heart forever imprinted with the indelible memory of the wounded stranger who had helped to save her world, and who had, for one brief, shining, unforgettable moment in time, been the sacred, cherished love of her life. The frontier was, and would always be, a place of harsh, unyielding realities and fleeting, precious joys. But the extraordinary love between Ethan and Sansi, though now just a poignant whisper against the wind, remained a powerful, enduring testament to the boundless capacity of the human heart to connect, to love, even across the deepest, most formidable divides. The land remained, wild and ruggedly beautiful, forever holding their secret, a timeless tale of courage, sacrifice, and a love that transcended all boundaries, a true, unforgettable legend of the untamed West.